Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at Noon, divers press ahead with their search for 34 passengers still missing 3 weeks after the Sewol-ho ferry capsized. The death of a civilian diver had briefly halted efforts. South Korea's foreign minister warns tensions over numerous historical, territorial and security issues in Northeast Asia could easily escalate into a military conflict. Plus, the US sends experts to help search for some 200 schoolgirls abducted by an Islamist militant group in Nigeria. These stories and more on Newsline at Noon.
It's noon Wednesday, May 7th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in live from Seoul. I'm Ojin Ju.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this afternoon. Exactly 3 weeks have passed now since the Sewol-ho ferry capsized off the southwestern coast of Korea. Days have turned into weeks, but more than 30 people are still unaccounted for.
For the latest on the recovery operations and the ongoing investigations, we connect to our Kwon So-ah at the news center. So-ah, what's the latest?
Well, recovery operations are expected to continue in full swing on this Wednesday. As from today, tidal currents are going to be at their calmest for 4 days. At a bit past 7 a.m., when the tides slowed down, divers began with their search. And a few hours ago, a female body was retrieved on the 4th floor of the ship. That means the number of missing now stands at 33, while 269 have been confirmed dead. The first search phase was completed as of Tuesday, when all 64 cabinets out of the total 111 that were thought to have held passengers were opened and searched through at least once. Now the cabins will be explored in detail, including bathrooms, storage rooms, and snack bars. Freight cars may also be searched. Now, out of concern for the rescue divers' health, more medical staff have been deployed at the accident site. This comes after a civilian diver died while searching the sunken vessel for victims on Tuesday. Just before dawn, the diver surnamed E went into the rough water to install new guideline ropes to the 5th floor of the ship to help in the search for the dozens of bodies that remain unaccounted for. After about 5 minutes at a depth of about 25 meters, the 53-year-old lost communication with his fellow divers. The veteran diver was found unconscious and was transported by helicopter to the nearest hospital in Mokpo, but died soon after arriving. Now, this is the first fatality among divers in the nearly 3 weeks of search and rescue operations. Officials are still trying to determine his exact cause of death.
An X-ray of his chest showed no irregularities, but a scan to the head showed a buildup of air inside his skull.
So that's just another sad note to this awful disaster, and let's hope that the remaining search operations are completed safely for the rest of the time of the search. And while the search for the missing continues, as it should, the investigations are also proceeding at a very fast pace.
Yes, Mark, but some are slowing down the investigations as people related to Yoo Byung-eun, the former Sewol Group chairman and practical owner of the Cheongjin Marine Company, which is the Sewol-ho ferry's operator, are not appearing in front of prosecutors for questioning. This includes Yoo's second son, who is said to be abroad. He was given an ultimatum to appear before prosecutors this Thursday after failing to show up 2 times before. If he doesn't come in tomorrow, he may be forced into the country with the help of the FBI. Meanwhile, at the prosecutor's office in Incheon, the special investigation team questioned 2 out of 7 key figures related to Yoo throughout the night. This includes Byun Gi-chun, the president of I1I Holdings, as well as Sewol Group president Go Chang-hwan, who are both suspected of irregular business practices.
And so people in Korea have just wrapped up a long holiday weekend that included Children's Day and Buddha's birthday. And during this long weekend, many people chose to pay respects to the victims of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster by visiting memorial altars. Tell us more about that.
Sure, Jinju. At a group memorial altar set up in the city of Ansan, where most of the victims were from, visitors from all around the country came with friends or family. Since it opened a week ago, the Ansan Memorial Hall and others set up throughout the nation have received about 1.3 million visitors. Outside the mass memorial hall in Ansan, about 10 parents of some of the youngest ferry passengers continued their silent protest for a fourth day on Tuesday. They held up signs expressing their discontent with the government over its handling of tragedy. Many of the victims' families blame the government for the slow rescue process. Now, that's all I have for now, but I'll be back with more updates in our later newscast.
Now, the public anger and outrage over the Sewol-ho ferry disaster is prompting the government to act swiftly in filling gaps in safety regulations. The government has announced plans to introduce an inspector within the Maritime Ministry to oversee not only the safety management of vessels, but also in the areas in which they operate. During a cabinet meeting Wednesday, officials also discussed shifting the current maritime safety system that focuses on emergency response to one that focuses more on preventing these accidents. Under the changes, a presidential decree would determine who is subject to safety inspections and when a vessel operator is required to submit its safety records. The measures are meant to address criticism that mismanagement and lax oversight led to last month's ferry accident.
South Korea's top diplomat has warned that a potentially devastating military collision in Northeast Asia is not something that is impossible, given the geopolitical climate in the region. The foreign minister's comments come as Japan strengthened its military ties with NATO through a new partnership deal during Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's trip to Brussels. Our UDN tells us more.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se says a military conflict could be on the cards in Northeast Asia, a region plagued by historical, regional, and security-related tensions. Speaking at the International Peace Institute in New York City on Tuesday, Yoon expressed his grave concern over the increasing rivalry in Northeast Asia. He noted China's emerging power, Japan's aim to make a comeback as a regional power, and Russia taking a tougher stance against the West. Minister Yoon said this, coupled with North Korea's ongoing nuclear threats, is creating serious changes to the geopolitical sphere of Northeast Asia, as well as to the Korean peninsula. The foreign minister's words of warning come as Japan tries to secure more military power. On Tuesday, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe signed a new partnership agreement with NATO that will deepen Tokyo's cooperation with the Western Military Alliance in areas including counter-piracy and humanitarian assistance. Speaking to ambassadors from the 28 NATO nations in Brussels, Abe also called for increased military freedom in Northeast Asia. Expressing concern over China's heavy military spending, the Japanese leader reiterated his wish to exercise the right to defend an ally under armed attack. Under the current interpretation of the constitution imposed after the Second World War, Japan is unable to settle international disputes using military force, even if it comes under attack. Abe said a panel of security experts is currently looking into changing this, with the government expected to come up with a policy on global peacekeeping operations. Yurian, Arirang News.
With speculation swirling over when North Korea might carry out a fourth nuclear test, a senior Chinese official who is viewed as being a messenger between the North and the United States is in Washington. He held talks with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry on Tuesday, where North Korea's nuclear program topped the agenda. Kim Yan-bin has the details.
The director of the International Department of China's Central Committee of the Communist Party held talks with U.S. Secretary John Kerry at the Department of State on Tuesday, local time. Wang Jieru, considered a messenger between China and North Korea, is believed to have discussed issues related to the Korean peninsula with Kerry, namely the North Korean nuclear threat and a possible resumption of the six-party talks. U.S. diplomatic sources note that Wang's visit to Washington is rare, and added that he is scheduled to meet with key U.S. diplomatic figures during his stay. It represents the latest development in a bid to curb North Korea's nuclear development. Last month, China's representative to the six-party denuclearization talks, Wu Da-wei, met with his U.S. counterpart Glenn Davies in Washington and New York although they failed to come up with a concrete plan to advance talks. The sense of urgency is spurred by increased activity at the North Korea's Punggye-ri nuclear test site. Recent satellite images show that North Korea has sealed a nuclear tunnel shaft there, suggesting it could conduct the fourth nuclear test at any given time. Most experts agree that Pyongyang is capable of carrying out a test in the near future, but South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff is trying to downplay the speculation. It says Pyongyang has opened and sealed the tunnel numerous times before, and that the move doesn't necessarily mean a test is imminent, but added that it is keeping a close watch on the situation regardless. North Korea has conducted 3 previous nuclear tests, most recently in February of last year. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, it's something we hope to never see, but a U.S. lawmaker says that if war were to break out on the Korean peninsula, Washington would deploy 20 Marine brigades to help defend the South. This is according to Howard McKeon, the chairman of the U.S. House Armed Service Committee. When asked Tuesday about war plans on the Korean peninsula during a debate on next year's National Defense Authorization Act, McKeon said 20 brigades would be mobilized, but some say federal budget cuts could make those plans unrealistic. The number of brigades in the Marine Corps is expected to drop to 21 once the cuts are complete, which would leave just 1 brigade in reserve. The United Nations Human Rights Council has given 268 recommendations to North Korea for its various human rights violations. They came from the UN Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Tuesday after a review on North Korea's human rights violations. With its prison camps and public executions, North Korea will now have to state which recommendations it will accept. The UN is urging Pyongyang to close its prison camps and to seriously address the issues of political prisoners and separated families. This report will be made public at the next Human Rights Council meeting in September.
The New York State Senate has passed a bill that requires the dual use of the Korean name EC and the Japanese name Sea of Japan to refer to the body of water that separates the two countries. At a general session on Tuesday, the state Senate passed the bill in an overwhelming 59-1 vote. The bill requires the dual usage of both names in all school textbooks from July 2016. For it to become law, the bill has to pass the lower house as well, and a similar bill on the EC name has been passed in Virginia in March. Spurred by their success, Korean American civic groups plan to push for similar legislation in states with high Korean American populations like California and New Jersey. Meanwhile, prior to the vote, the New York State Senate adopted a resolution expressing its condolences for the victims of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. Now, moving on, after the botched government response to the Sewol-ho ferry disaster, a great deal of criticism has been leveled at the harmful actions or inaction of former government officials heading public organizations. Among 38 heads of public agencies under government monitoring for reckless management, almost half were so-called parachute appointments. Kim Min-ji reports.
Light has been shed on a series of parachute appointment cases at public institutions. Data has shown that almost half of former government officials that held the top positions of public institutions got their jobs from cronyism and not really based on their qualifications. Among the 38 heads of public organizations under the priority control of the government for reckless management, 18 were former government officials. Former officials of the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy now head public organizations such as the Korea Trade Insurance Corporation and the Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power. The heads of other public institutions, including the Korea Exchange and the Korea Deposit Insurance Corporation, were from the Ministry of Strategy and Finance. A list of officials from other ministries, the Maritime, Culture, Transportation, Agriculture and Fisheries, also held top rankings of public organizations. In some cases, there were former government officials that were not even related to the job, while at others, former politicians held top-ranking positions. More than half of the standing auditors at these so-called reckless management public institutions were former government officials, while 31% of them were non-executive directors and 18% executive directors. The Korea Deposit Insurance Corporation had the highest ratio of such officials, followed by the Korea Gas Technology Corporation and Gangwon Land Corporation. Experts say the normalization of public institutions should begin with the rooting out of these parachute appointments. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's biggest companies reported weaker earnings last year compared to a year earlier, casting further doubt on the nation's moderate pace of recovery, according to data compiled by market researcher FN Guide on Wednesday. The pre-tax profits of 87 affiliates under the nation's 10 major conglomerates dropped almost 15% last year from 2012 to around 50 billion US dollars. When taking Samsung Electronics out of the equation, the drop is even more pronounced at more than 30%. The poor performance of local companies also hit corporate tax collection. It dropped nearly 6% to $10 billion in 2013 from a year earlier. Now it's history in the making in the stock listings world. Alibaba, one of the world's largest and fastest growing internet companies, has officially filed its initial public offering, IPO, in the US, and it could be one of the biggest ever. Connie Lee reports.
Alibaba is not only the biggest online marketplace in China, according to some reports, it's the biggest online marketplace in the world. And now the e-commerce giant has its eyes on the US, officially filing to launch an initial public offering there. In its registration statement, the Chinese company said it plans to raise $1 billion, but analysts say the amount is likely to go much higher. Some expect its IPO to surpass that of Facebook, which raised $16.4 billion in 2012, while others expect Alibaba's offering to be as big as credit card company Visa, which raised nearly $20 billion in 2008. If the total surpasses that amount, Alibaba's IPO could become one of the largest ever in the U.S. Based on the average estimate from a dozen analysts surveyed by Bloomberg News, Alibaba is valued at $168 billion. So what exactly is Alibaba? Simply put, the online marketplace is described as a mixture of Amazon, eBay, and PayPal, but with sales that trumpet those three online sites. Alibaba accounts for about 80% of online shopping in China, and although it's widely known there and among global tech industry watchers, Alibaba is much lesser known in the West. The tech giant is set to make its debut either on the New York Stock Exchange or the Nasdaq sometime this summer. It was in 1999 when the company was founded in eastern China by 49-year-old Jack Ma. He was worth $4 billion last year. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And time now for a look through some more of the international headlines we're following at this hour. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the News Center.
Eunice, we hear that U.S. aid is on its way to help locate the abducted schoolgirls in Nigeria.
Hi guys, that's right. As global outrage grows over the lack of progress in the now 3-week-old search for the more than 200 missing teenagers, a team of U.S. experts are en route to Nigeria. Personnel from military and law enforcement backgrounds are expected to assist Nigerian forces via logistical and intelligence support. Overnight, the Goodluck Jonathan government accepted the U.S. offer for help. This as 8 more girls were reported kidnapped by suspected Boko Haram militants in the same state. The latest raid took place in the northeastern village of Warabe, where gunmen also took animals and food. And on Monday, local time, a video featuring a self-proclaimed leader of Boko Haram surfaced, saying the group, in accordance with directions from Allah, will continue to kidnap the daughters of Christians, force them to convert to Islam, and sell them into slavery. At a meeting of the Council of Europe in Vienna, Austria, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov ruled out new talks to diffuse rising tensions in Ukraine, reasoning that an earlier accord amongst Ukraine, the EU, Russia, and the U.S. has yet to be implemented by pro-Russian groups on the ground. This as German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier says Ukraine is, quote, just a few steps away from a military confrontation. The weekend saw the country's worst day of violence since the ouster of Ukraine's former president in the mostly peaceful city of Odessa, where more than 40 were killed. Kiev's Interior Ministry also says 30 pro-Russian insurgents died Monday as Kiev tried to retake the city of Slavyansk. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says South Sudan's rebel chief has agreed to the idea of peace talks to end the months-long conflict that has killed thousands and displaced more than 1 million people. The UN leader arrived in South Sudan Tuesday to call on the feuding leaders to find a political solution, his visit following U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's last week, during which he warned of consequences if rebels and the Salva Kiir government do not commit to peace talks. The two sides have continued to battle despite a ceasefire agreement signed in January. And a new study has found that parts of East Antarctica, once considered more stable than the West Antarctic ice sheet, could begin an irreversible melting trend and raise the world's sea levels to dangerous levels within the century. The findings come from scientists at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Research in Germany, who said that the vast ice sheets hold enough water to raise sea levels by 53 meters. The study has been published in the journal Nature Climate Change.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju with market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
Over the long holiday weekend here in Korea, many people also took time to thank a living legend. They packed an ice rink to bid farewell to Kim Yeon-na, the figure skating sensation that left a lasting mark in the history books and in the minds of sport fans. Arirang News' Hong Ji-san takes us to the scene of Queen Yeon-na's last official performance on ice.
17 years of competition on ice. Olympic and world champion Kim Yeon-na has been waiting for this moment for a very, very long time to close her chapter as a competitive skater. And for her last gala, she transformed into a princess who can't sleep, taking the ice with the opera Turandot, one that she always wanted to skate to. From her signature Yeon-na camel spin to triple jumps, her skating is flawless like it always has been. Even though she steps down from the competitive spotlight, skaters believe unanimously that there has not been, and may never be, another perfect skater like Kim.
I have such respect for you and all that you've done, and to come back and skate the way you skated, it was even better, and you were, to me, the best. You've just changed the sport, so thank you for what you've given to the sport.
It is time to say goodbye, but it's hard for the fans to see the Queen leave the ice, as she has been a mainstay of hope and inspiration to her audiences. Kim, who already donated to UNICEF for the Sewol-ho ferry victims, spared a minute of silence before the start of the show.
Her performance is a great consolation to the nation, especially at a time when it's in sorrow and like now. I wish her all the best for her future.
The figure skater who always stood on the podium in every competition she entered in now has a future entirely open to herself, in which she said figure skating will always be some part of.
Even after the Olympics, I trained as usual to give the best in this ice show for my fans. As for the future, I will take things slow, take some rest, as it's really over now.
Kim let go her status as national skater as of Tuesday, marked the beginning of a new life away from competitive skating. 송지선, 아리랑 뉴스.
I'm Lee Ji-hyun with the latest weather updates. Well, temperatures will continue to be on the warm side with highs hovering above 20 degrees Celsius across the region. But the morning sun should gradually give way to clouds as the day goes on and even drop showers in the evening to the Seoul metro area, somewhere between 5 to 10 millimeters overnight. And it seems like regions in the east will remain quite dry with dry weather advisory in effect, so be sure to stay hydrated and be extra cautious when handling fires. Now, over in Jindo, winds and waves will pick up in the afternoon, but the speed of tidal currents should decrease due to the neap tide period, which starts from today. And as for the weather outlook here in the capital, temperatures should remain within the seasonal averages with a good amount of sunshine, but nationwide showers on Sunday will drag down temperatures a few notches. So please do keep that in mind, and let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The high in Seoul will rise to 21, Daegu will peak at 26, while Gwangju and Busan climb to 25 and 21 respectively. For other regions, it looks like down on Jeju will reach 23, Daejeon peaks at 25, and Dokdo should see a high of 19, while Mount Keungang tops out at 15. Well, that's all I have for you today, but I'll be back with more updates tomorrow morning.
Well, thank you very much, as always, for the weather there, Jian, and those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.